That's right, we are going to go over 4 lessons that Forte has taught me about music production. That's right, you're tuned into Whisky and Synths, Slanjovan music producers. My name's Dave. I run this channel and I run 2 music studios in the UK, and over the last 7 years I've helped over 500 people like you finish their tracks and get their music out there. And in these shows we look at different music makers and learn stuff from them, and Forte is an amazing one. He just put out an album this year. He's off the back of working with Skrillex, Fred again, and doing huge gigs like headlining Coachella as well, not so long ago. Absolutely amazing stuff, and he's always been innovative, even way back to 2003 where I first heard his album Rounds, and this is when guitar music dominated. I loved all that, but this brought me back to my love of synths and keyboards and electronic music and samplers and all that stuff as well. So we're definitely going to get a look at 4 awesome tricks I've learned from him. If you want to dig deeper, the sources are at the bottom of this video as well, and we're going to go through it kind of podcast style, just chatting about it. Hopefully you're an intermediate or maybe an advanced music producer who just wants a video just chatting about these things, and you can take away these tips and use them in your own music. Let's get into it. So one thing that Forte is famous for is his messy sounds, as he's quoted as saying. And you know, his productions are kind of quite innovative, imaginative, and sound a lot different to a lot of people's music. And he said putting in messy sounds, as he calls them, helps with that. For example, you'll have loops that are actually off-grid, but quietly looping away in the background as a texture. And this is something he deliberately does all the time. Maybe sometimes it's an effect that maybe like a delay, but it's actually not synced perfectly to the beat. Can be another example of that. And these rugged sounds that are imperfect, he says, actually are what makes the kind of textures in the mix come to life. And they don't have to be loud, they don't have to be at the forefront of your mix, but if they're just there, it's the kind of thing, if you mute it, you realize something's gone, but if when it's in the mix, it's not the most prominent thing you hear. Definitely worth trying messy sounds in your music production to get more interesting textures into it. Another cool thing he said he did for his latest album was explored his music collection that he'd made himself since he was a teenager. And he said even back then he was making stuff on cassettes, DAT tapes, and he was kind of mining all the stuff he'd previously made. So if you've been making music for a while, even a few years, go back to your old projects, see if there's any cool sounds in them, and then take those sounds, maybe resample them and put them into your newer projects. Create your own sample library out of your old stuff. This sample library, no one else will have it apart from you. It actually means something to you because it's telling your story over those years. And the further back you can go, the further back the story goes. So some people are scared to revisit their old work, but Forte was saying this nostalgia actually brought back this teenage excitement of music making, this naivety he had back then that really rejuvenated him. So it might be worth doing, even if you've not been making music for say over 20, 25 years like he has. It's still worth giving a go, mining your old archive. One example he said was there's a guitar sound. He's like, why would I make another guitar sound? I nailed it that time ages and ages and ages ago, and then resampled it and reused it, and you can use it as a loop. You can pitch it up and down, whatever you want. But I've heard Boards of Canada talking about doing things like this as well, and it's a fun thing to do. I even tried it on a track. My brother James and I made an album over 15 years ago now, and we've resampled it sometimes in our last of the free electronica project, which has been fun to do as well. So I definitely recommend it. So just before we get on to my next tip from Forte, if you're struggling to finish your tracks and get your best ideas out there, I do have something for you. It's the Finish That Damn Track plan. So basically it's a challenge over 10 days, 10 steps. You get an email from me every day with a quick thing saying what you have to do, a little checklist, an artist quote for inspiration, and then a little action point, what you have to do. And it's only going to be 30 minutes a day, so probably not more time than you're already putting in. I just help you use that time more wisely. So if going from an 8-bar loop to a self-mastered track sounds good to you, click below to sign up for the Finish That Damn Track challenge. All right, and here's some extra tips from Forte you can probably use as you're doing that challenge. All right, let's get into the next tip from Forte. All right, so this next one is about the track Daydream Repeat, where it's got a really well-known harp pattern going through it. And we're going to look at that in a bit more in the next tip as well. But he mentioned something to do with musical training on this. So he said whenever he's drawing in melodies or bass lines or anything like that, he gets the MIDI notes and just moves them around like this. He doesn't actually play stuff in by hand. He actually loves drawing it out. And he said working with Fred again, who's actually more musically trained, he could actually name the chord they were looking for, the scale or the notes. And he said sometimes that's great, but it's just not the way he's been trained in music as Forte and as a person. So he said that this lack of training sometimes can stumble you a little bit, but also can lead to happy accidents that are unconventional. So it's well worth, you know, even if you are musically trained, sometimes trying things that might be a bit more random, like just placing notes kind of almost randomly in a kind of MIDI roll or a clip, or, you know, using some sort of step sequencer with random generators and stuff like that, because this whole thing of happy accidents is really a useful thing in music making and can get you inspiration going, even with an idea that you didn't really mean to intend to start. And I do think that's why people get into hardware synths and keyboards and modular and all that, because it's almost easier to accidentally hook something up wrong and you're like, oh, what did I do there? And you get a happy accident. But it is doable in a DAW like Ableton, for example, as well. So yeah, happy accidents are an important part of music making. And that was Forte's thoughts on it there. This next tip actually relates to that harp melody. Now, he said for all his melodies and sometimes bass lines and other sounds, he does this trick a lot where he gets a randomization plugin, and a lot of DAWs, like I'm pretty sure Ableton's got one built in now, and he'll randomize the velocity of the hit by 15%. So every hit is actually hitting a little bit harder, a little bit softer than before. Just like when a human will be playing a keyboard or a guitar or other instruments, you know, musicians have great control over instrument, but you can never exactly replicate the intricacies of how hard or softly you play on like something like a stringed instrument, for example. You get pretty close, but never be exactly the same because they're such delicate, sensitive instruments. So having this adds this humanization element to your musical patterns and stops them being too boring. He also said he randomized the pitch, so every so often there would be an octave higher or lower. And this is randomized by 15% as well, just to add interest to the loop. So it's not always the exact same 8-bar loop going round and round. This is really important to add variation. And the funny thing he said about that is that means whenever he plays it back in his DAW, it will be slightly different because it's randomized. So whenever he bounces it or, you know, exports it, it's slightly different. So he said the export for the vinyl is actually slightly different to the one on the digital streaming platforms. And if he'd done an extra bounce or export for his set as a DJ with some tweaks, then it'd be different again. And I think that's really, he thought it was quite magical, and I'd agree with that as well. So hopefully you found this video really useful for your own productions. Take away some of these tips, use them in your own music. There might be another video of Forte coming up as well, because I've learned a lot when I was researching them. Remember, the sources are down there below in the comments. If you want to leave a comment on other producers you'd like to learn from, comment below and I'll do the research and find out stuff that might help you with your own productions. Also, just remember, I've got my Finish That Damn Track challenge. 10 days, 10 steps, one self-mastered track, only 30 minutes a day, and it's free to join as well. And I just send you the stuff out by email, and I'm actually the end of those emails, so you can always email me back for tips and advice. And I even offer 4 free one-to-one training sessions every month. They're on Zoom. You can do it from anywhere, so click below if you're interested in that. I'm here to help all the music producers and music makers of the world as much as I can get more fulfillment and enjoyment out of doing their music. So hopefully this has been nice for you. It's been awesome hanging out with you. I've got other videos on the channel. Like I said, you can actually get in touch with me down below. But maybe now it's time to close the old YouTube or wherever you're listening to this. It's on Spotify or whatever. And open Ableton and make some music and have some fun with it. Just start exploring. Don't put too much pressure on yourself and have some fun with it. You've been tuned into Whisky and Synths. My name's Dave. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. Whisky and Synths.